The morning sun stretched over miles of green pasture, the kind of land that had been in Marcus Reed's family for 4 generations. His farm wasn't just a livelihood, it was heritage. Rows of corn swayed in the breeze, cattle grazed lazily on the open field, and the red barn stood like a sentinel of time, weathered but unyielding. Marcus wasn't the type of man who spoke much about his work outside of the farm. Neighbors saw him in worn jeans and boots, tending to the soil with quiet determination. To them, he was just the farmer on the edge of town, the one who kept mostly to himself. Few knew that when he wasn't baling hay or fixing fences, Marcus was also the director of the Federal Aviation Administration (FAA), the man who oversaw every regulation, certification, and enforcement action for air travel across the United States. But the local homeowners association didn't care about that. To them, Marcus's land was nothing but unused space adjacent to their community. For months, they had tossed around the idea of turning their little neighborhood into something prestigious. A private runway, they reasoned, would do the trick, a luxury addition that would attract wealthy homeowners, increase property values, and make their subdivision stand out. Instead of going through proper channels, they made a reckless choice. One morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. When he stepped outside, dust filled the air. Bulldozers and excavators were rumbling across his pasture. His fences were flattened, crops torn apart, and his grazing cattle scattered in confusion. A long, crude strip of dirt was already being carved into his farmland. Workers in neon vests barked orders while WA board members watched smugly from lawn chairs set up at the edge of the chaos. "What the hell do you think you're doing on my land?" Marcus demanded, his deep voice carrying across the field. A middle-aged man in a polo shirt and expensive sunglasses, the WA president, smirked. "Relax. This is community development. Your little farm wasn't doing much anyway. We're building a private airstrip. Everyone's going to benefit from it." Marcus's jaw tightened. "This is my property. You're trespassing, destroying my crops, and endangering my livestock." The man chuckled. "We filed it under eminent domain. The WA voted. Majority rules. You'll be compensated later." "Maybe." Marcus looked at the ruined earth, his heritage torn up by entitled hands. He could have shouted, could have thrown them off his land by force, but he didn't. Instead, he calmly pulled out his phone, snapped several photos, and made a call. Within 2 hours, the first federal vehicles arrived. Black SUVs rolled up, men and women in suits stepped out, and the WA members started looking uneasy. The president's smugness faltered when one of the agents asked for his name and ID. "What's this about?" the president stammered. Marcus finally broke his silence. "You built an unauthorized airstrip. On private property, without permits, without clearance, and directly through FAA-regulated airspace." Confusion rippled through the group. One of the board members asked nervously, "Wait, what does this have to do with the FAA?" Marcus stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the president. "Everything. I'm Marcus Reed, director of the Federal Aviation Administration. And you just violated federal law in more ways than I can count." The WA members paled. Suddenly, the weight of their arrogance hit them. They hadn't just messed with a farmer, they'd bulldozed through the land of the man who oversaw the very skies they wanted to fly in. The agents fanned out, taking statements, documenting the damage, and shutting down the construction. The machinery was seized on the spot. The runway was declared a federal hazard zone. The HOA's grand plan for prestige had turned into a legal disaster. By evening, the once proud board members were being served notices of investigation. Fines were stacking up, each violation, each safety breach, each trespass added to the growing total. It wasn't just thousands, it was millions. Marcus stood at the edge of his field, arms crossed, watching as federal trucks hauled away the equipment. His farm was scarred, but he knew it would recover. What mattered was that the people who thought they could bulldoze his history had finally learned who they were dealing with. The sun rose over the horizon, spilling light across the rolling acres of Marcus Reed's farm. The morning dew still clung to the blades of grass, and the fields stretched wide in every direction, painting a picture of hard work and legacy. Marcus walked the land like he did every morning, boots sinking into the soil that had been in his family for over 4 generations. This farm wasn't just land, it was a history book. Every barn beam, every fence post, every carved-out pasture told the story of Reed blood, sweat, and determination. The cattle mooed lazily in the distance, tails swishing, while the red barn, faded but strong, stood as a testament to time. Marcus's life looked simple to those who only passed by, a farmer rising with the sun, laboring under the sky, and resting when the stars came out. Neighbors in town often waved at him, calling him the quiet farmer who kept to himself. They didn't know the whole truth. When Marcus wasn't mending fences or harvesting crops, he was in meetings with senators, reviewing safety policies with airline CEOs, and making critical decisions that shaped the skies above America. Marcus Reed wasn't just a farmer, he was the director of the Federal Aviation Administration, the man who controlled the rules of the air. He liked it that way. The quiet farm grounded him, reminded him where he came from, and gave him a place of peace away from the politics and pressures of Washington, D.C. But peace has a way of attracting trouble. The local homeowners association, running the shiny new subdivision that bordered part of Marcus's land, had been scheming for months. They prided themselves on being forward-thinking, always pushing for ways to raise property values and make their neighborhood stand out. They built tennis courts, installed decorative street lamps, and even pressured residents into approved paint colors for their houses. Yet none of that gave them the status they craved. At one meeting, the WA president, a man named Charles Whitmore, who wore polos like a uniform and thought his word was law, pitched an idea. What if we built a private runway? Imagine the kind of prestige that would bring. We'd attract wealthy homeowners, pilots, and business executives. Property values would skyrocket. A murmur of approval spread through the board. One woman raised her hand nervously. But, where would it go? We don't have the space. Whitmore smirked. Reed's land is just sitting there. Acres of grass and dirt doing nothing. He's got more than he needs. And what's he going to do about it? He's just a farmer. They all laughed. None of them bothered to research who Marcus really was. To them, he was some rustic nobody, too quiet and too old-fashioned to fight back against progress. The vote passed unanimously. By dawn a week later, Marcus woke up to the ground-shaking roar of machinery. He stepped onto his porch and froze. Bulldozers were tearing into his pasture, flattening fences and leaving deep scars in the earth. His cattle scattered in panic, some nearly trampled by the machines. Crops he had spent months tending were ripped apart in seconds. Workers in neon vests barked orders, their helmets shining under the morning sun. And there, in lawn chairs at the edge of the chaos, sat the WA board, sipping coffee, pointing at blueprints, and laughing like they were at a weekend picnic. Marcus's blood boiled. He stormed across his land, boots crunching against the churned-up dirt. What the hell do you think you're doing on my property? His voice thundered louder than the bulldozers. Whitmore stood, smirking, and casually adjusted his sunglasses. Good morning, Mr. Reed. Don't worry, this is all perfectly fine. We're building something that'll benefit the whole community. A private runway. This place is going to be the crown jewel of the county. Marcus's fists clenched. This is my land. You had no right to come here, no permission to touch a damn thing. You're trespassing and destroying my farm. Whitmore chuckled, his arrogance dripping from every word. Relax. We filed it under eminent domain. The WA voted, and majority rules. You'll be compensated later. Maybe. You should thank us. This will put your dusty farm on the map. Behind him, another board member snickered. It's not like you're using the land for anything important. It's just cows and dirt. The words hit Marcus like a slap, but instead of shouting back, he did something that rattled the entire board. He went silent. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and began snapping photos of the damage, the equipment, and the people laughing at his expense. Then he calmly made a call. 2 hours later, black SUVs with tinted windows rolled onto the dirt road leading to Marcus's farm. Men and women in dark suits stepped out, carrying clipboards, cameras, and badges. Federal agents. Their presence turned the once smug lawn chair audience into a group of nervous fidgeters. Excuse me, one agent said firmly, walking directly up to Whitmore. We need your name and identification immediately. Whitmore blinked, confused. What is this about? This is private business. You can't just. The agent cut him off. You constructed an unauthorized runway. On private property. Without permits. Without FAA clearance. And directly in regulated airspace. This is a serious federal violation. The board members exchanged panicked glances. One woman whispered, FAA. What does this have to do with the FAA? It was then Marcus stepped forward, his shadow long against the ruined soil. His voice was calm but heavy with authority. Everything. I'm Marcus Reed, Director of the Federal Aviation Administration. And you just bulldozed your way into federal crimes. Gasps rippled through the group. Whitmore's smug grin drained from his face, replaced by the pale realization of what he'd done. The laughter from earlier evaporated into silence as the weight of Marcus's words sank in. They hadn't just angered a farmer. They had violated the laws of the skies under the watch of the man who enforced them. The agents spread out, documenting every piece of equipment, marking off the torn earth, and questioning workers. The bulldozers were impounded, construction halted on the spot. By the end of the day, federal notices were served to the entire board. Fines began piling up, each infraction carrying a penalty that made their dreams of prestige collapse into financial ruin. What they thought would raise property values was about to bankrupt them. Marcus stood silently, watching as the agents worked. His land was scarred, yes, but it could be restored. Crops would grow again, cattle would settle, and fences would be rebuilt. What mattered now was that the people who had dismissed him as just a farmer finally understood who they were dealing with. The WA had built their runway straight into a disaster, and Marcus Reed, calm, patient, and unyielding, wasn't finished with them yet.